Any other hopes? What other hopes do you have? What's your number one goal for homeschooling high school?
I think that my kids will find and embrace what God made them to do in this world.
Yes.
And that they'll have the time to explore and learn.
Okay.
That time where I know high school for me was very
Regimented?
overwhelmed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, there was no time, and there wasn't a lot of choice, and
Yeah. So her number one goal is that she wants her children to know and enjoy the beauty that God created them, and to have time to explore. Write that down, because that's really going to help. When it gets where you're in overwhelm or overload, or you hit a thick part, you're going to say, hey, let's take some time to explore, because that's one of our top priorities. And that gives you permission. It'll be easier for you to be brave and make a change and try something new if you know the reason that you're doing it. What's that saying? Start with why. That's the benefit of knowing what your number one goal is, what your number one priority is. That's the bullseye on your target. Love of learning, for them to know how beautiful they are, to have time to explore. That's your target, and then it will expand out. The products that you use, the people that you use, but you start with your powerful why, and that's the direction that you go in. That's where you're aiming your arrow, and that helps. Otherwise, there's a lot of noise out there. It can be very overwhelming, but you've just given yourself a clear course, and that makes everything so much easier. You know, our goal is not for you to get into the Olympics. Our goal is not for you to be a Hollywood star. Our goal is, we've decided together that's not your goal. Our goal is for you to explore, to know how beautiful you are, to have a love of learning, to be able to get into your first choice college, be able to get into that cooking school that you really have an eye on, to be able to get into that art school, to be able to start your own business. That's the bullseye that you've created, and then you find the arrows that go to that. It'll give you focus and peace of mind. I'm looking at the time here, and you have this booklet here. This is great to have your teen read. I wish that I could take credit for writing this. My colleague Jamie Gaddy wrote it, and I think she did such a beautiful, respectful job. You'll notice it talks about beginning the adventure. What's my game plan? Learning styles. So take a look at this. And there's information in the back too, because Let's Homeschool High School has lots of forms. All of these are printables. You can go and print all of this out on the site. So you have those forms for a high school transcript where you keep track of your units. So if you decide to do it yourself, all of the forms are here. It might also help too is that homeschool.com has now expanded to include Let's Homeschool High School and also A to Z, which has been around 20 years. And so they're having a virtual conference just about high school. And it's going to cover, you can see some information on the back of this, but it might be very helpful. It's talking about how do you create a 4-year high school plan? How can you homeschool for free, even if you want? How do you navigate college admission process and exploring college alternatives? I like to think of those as uncollege alternatives, because not everybody wants to go to college. As we said, I like them to have that option, but we all have our own path, right? So you might really want to, and the whole virtual conference, it's $19, and it gives you a 90-day all-access pass. So that way, in the comfort of your own home, you can listen to the speakers. There's even a virtual vendor hall that can connect you with vendors. But that's kind of nice too, because if you find a speaker that's really, really good, then you can have your teen watch that video as well. And now let's talk about too, because I promised you that we'd be talking about, myths. What are the myths about, how many times can I say that without a lisp? What are the myths about homeschooling high school? So myth number 1 is it's hard. And the reality is they teach themselves. So if you can set it up properly, high school is not harder. In many ways, you have more time. You're driving in places, you're paying for things, and you're a facilitator, but usually they teach themselves. So high school, it doesn't have to be hard. And we know about languaging, right? homeschooling high school may be different, but it isn't hard. Myth number 2, it's expensive. And the reality is you can homeschool for free if you want. Here's a tip. You can use the internet, YouTube, museums, neighbors. You can homeschool for free if you want. You can do trades. So it can be as inexpensive or as expensive as you want. And according to survey results, the amount of money that you put into your homeschool does not determine the level of success. I found that to be very comforting. Also comforting is that the level of the parent's education also was not a determinant of the child's success. So parents who have a high school diploma homeschool just as well as someone with a master's or a doctorate, if they love it. If they love it, if they enjoy it, if they're really passionate about it. Myth number 3, they won't be able to get into college. And the reality is that homeschoolers are being recruited by colleges for what is called academic vitality. You know what academic vitality is? Love of learning, right? Learning for the pleasure of it, because so many of these kids, it's been so hard to get into college. It's getting easier now. By the time your kids get there, it's going to be easier. But when my kids were getting in, oh my gosh, it was almost impossible, because the baby boomer bubble, that huge population bubble, it was all of their children who were applying to college at the same time. And those colleges only had the same number of seats that they had in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but suddenly now there were 4 times more people applying for those seats. But fortunately, now that big population bubble has moved on, so your children will have a much easier time. It'll be a different game for them. They won't have to have a 4.2 and a business on the side and 70 hours of volunteering in addition to 4 years of everything. Oh my gosh, I felt sorry for my kids. When I wanted to go to college, I only had to have algebra and geometry. I only had to have 2 years of a language. It was a different game and it was so much easier. But fortunately for you, it's going to be easier as well. And they are being recruited by colleges. Yes, please.
I just wanted to share, my oldest graduated last year from Pepperdine.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. And we homeschooled her last 2 years of high school. So her junior year, we did our own curriculums and our own private homeschooling. And then her senior year, we did Kava online, partly because she was kind of bucking me in the junior year and deadlines and assignments that I was giving. So I was like, okay, let them give you the deadlines and you can try to argue with the online program. But anyway, so she successfully completed that, and she did just one extracurricular thing, Write Girl, which is a program for writing, encouraging teen girls to express themselves through writing, and that was on her. But she got into Pepperdine, and it's a smaller school, and it costs a lot of money.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Pepperdine is an excellent school, an excellent reputation. So I think that's a comfort for people to hear. And she was saying that her daughter graduated from Pepperdine, which is an excellent school, and they created their own curriculum in the beginning. And then when her child was resistant to her input, then she used an online program because she felt it was time to use a third party to be the one to work with, and that it worked out well. So anyone who's listening to the recording for this too, let that be a comfort. Myth number 4, you can't homeschool special needs. Does anyone here have a special needs child? Yes? Mm-hmm. What is your child's special need?
Visual motor.
Visual motor? Okay, and I have a son on the autism spectrum and who also has blindness. And I found if you have friends who are interested in homeschooling, it ended up being one of the best gifts that we gave my son. We didn't homeschool because he had these special issues, but it worked out so well because I was customizing the curriculum all the time based on the kids. So it didn't matter that some kids were ahead here, some kids were slower then. And he's in his 20s now, and the doctors have said to me, what did you do differently? Most of the kids on the autism spectrum in their 20s are damaged. That they've had a lot of bullying. He said, but your son's heart is intact. And I credit homeschooling for that. He encountered kind people. He decided to go his freshman year to a public high school, and he said in his words, "So much busyness for so little learning." But when he said we'd move to a new town, and he said he wanted to give it a try, and of course I said, that sounds like a great idea. But he did have some bullying there. It was the wrestling kids had come in, and my son happens to be 6'2", and he looks like he's a football player, but he's not. He's a tender rider. And so when I picked him up from school that day, he was a little bit teary. But that was his only bullying thing. And that's a huge benefit from homeschooling, that they get to go on to life less damaged. I mean, nobody gets through life completely, damage-free. But I think that if we can help them keep their hearts intact, that's really a great gift. Yeah. Myth number 5. You have to strictly follow curriculum. So we've been talking about that. The reality is that it's not possible to teach everything. You teach them how to learn. You give them a love of learning. So the tip is be flexible, customize the curriculum. Because it's what they're good at. It's where their interests, that's where they're going to probably focus in life. Not everybody becomes a mathematician, but people who love math can become a mathematician. So, help them keep thinking about, what do you love? What are you really good at? It's those things that we love that we tend to get really good at because we do it more and more. And of course, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And in high school, when they are sampling the buffet of all of the different subjects that are available, I love that about high school because they don't know right now what they're going to love. So taste biology, taste economics, taste civics, to find out if you get a joy spark from any of that. And pay attention to those joy sparks, because that might become a career for them later on down the line. So encourage them, say, no, we're just going to try this. And remember, the more you do something, the better you are at it, and everybody sucks in the beginning. Right? Nobody picks up a violin and is a virtuoso. We watch these movies and TV shows, and we think that everybody lives in a fabulous apartment in New York, and that they're good at everything first time, but we know that that's not reality. And they're growing up too with Facebook and social media, where they're comparing themselves with a photoshopped version of their friends' lives. So be sure to encourage them. No, let's focus on growth. Let's focus on practicing it. Yes?
How do you customize a curriculum if it's too challenging? If they need to move on to, let's say, Spanish 1 might be difficult, they have to go on to Spanish 2. So you need to master everything in Spanish 1. How do you customize it to make it simpler?
So her question is, how do you customize their curriculum? She says, for example, you have to go from Spanish 1 to Spanish 2. So we used the summers. So remember, people say you have to have 4 years of history, 4 years of science. It doesn't say that you only have 1 year for each subject. It doesn't say that you have to spend a year on Spanish 1, or that you can only spend a year on Spanish 1. One of the things I love best about homeschooling is this mastery learning. So maybe foreign languages are really good for them. So maybe they finish that Spanish 1 in 1 semester and then they go on. Or if they want to go on to Spanish 2 and you go, oh, I don't know if you have the prerequisites yet, because for languages and math, it really does matter. Then maybe you say, hey, let's go to Spain, or let's take some Spanish classes over the summer, or let's get a Spanish video. So that's how you customize the curriculum. You supplement it. And I'm hoping that they're learning Spanish because they're interested in it. Because remember, the colleges, they don't care what the language is. If they're interested in Arabic or Japanese, they can study Arabic or Japanese. And in fact, it looks kind of cool on an application. It doesn't have to only be Spanish, and you can take as long as you want. It just means that by the time you're applying to colleges, and different subjects will take different amounts of time, because that's a benefit of homeschooling over school-based cookie-cutter learning. Your child gets to learn at their own pace. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower. Yes, how are we doing? Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Oh, that's good. Okay. I have another one too, myth number 6, which I thought of too as I've been visiting people, socialization. If you homeschool them in high school, they're not going to have a social life. But you know that's why Olympic athletes and all these movie stars, they all homeschool, because you can do it in 4 hours a day. And that gives you a lot more time to develop your passions. Whether it's building things or karate or dance or whatever it is. I had a chance to interview Temple Grandin. She's the queen of autism. Oh my gosh, I love her so much. And she gave me some advice that if life had a rewind button, I would do what she said. And she said that she thinks that any child, autistic or not, by the time they finish high school, should have worked 2 jobs. And I didn't do that. Like with my son, for example, the low-hanging fruit, the easy fruit was academics because he was good at it, so we did lots of academics. And we didn't do the working outside the home, the making as many friends things, because that was harder. So I think that Temple Grandin's onto something there. You know, if you can, use that as part of your curriculum, your plan, that, hey, and let's do that too. You know, I have it on good advice, you know, from someone who has given a lot of thought, that maybe one of our goals should be that by the time you graduate from high school, have 2 jobs. And then I heard that too about people for college graduates. And your child probably heard that too, that by the time you finish college, try to have had at least 2 internships or 2 jobs. Because otherwise you finish up with a resume but no real world experience. Okay, so for our last thing here, okay, I want us to take a minute to visualize in a perfect world, what does your high school experience look like, feel like, and smell like? And visualization works. You've heard the stories about the POW prisoners who had no access to golf clubs or a piano, but they visualized themselves playing, and when they were released, their skills were improved, even though they had never actually done it. So try to use this visualization as often as you can. It gives instructions to your subconscious, which is driving 85% of our actions. We have just now told our subconscious that, hey, I may get down in the weeds sometime, or I may get tired, but in a perfect world, this is what we want our homeschool to be like. Please direct me in that direction. So let's just take 1 minute to visualize that. Okay, if you can, write that down. Put it in an email, take a note, do something, because you're in an inspired state right now. So you're receiving some very high information. You're thinking now from joy, not from fear. And so you've probably been given a very nice vision here to follow. So try to write that down and refer to it. Did you know that just by writing down your goals and referring to them over and over again, you have a 70 to 80% chance of achieving them? And once again, that's because you're giving your subconscious driving directions. Thank you, everyone, for being here and being such good sharers. It made the experience richer for everyone. I have some free books here for you, just as a thank you. So Dana, would you mind passing these out? The first book that I wrote was called Homeschooling for Success, and it was by Time Warner, was the publisher. And so they came to homeschool.com and they said, would you write our homeschooling book? And in the beginning, I wasn't going to write it, but then a friend of mine said, hey, writing a book is on your bucket list. So who would like, I have 2 copies. Okay, I happen to see these 2 hands first, please. The woman in the sweater and then the woman sitting right there with the hoodie. And make sure that I think that I saw her hands. Next is now, we have plenty of copies. Anybody who wants at booth 701, I asked Time for Learning to give away free copies of our book. So if you'd like, come on by. I'll even autograph it for you. But we have some copies here. And then I have 2 copies of a Summertime Survival Guide, if anyone would like it. Okay, you please, and in the back row, please. And then come by and visit booth 701. Would you mind? Thank you so much. And we have free t-shirts as well at the booth. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.